All right, so for those watching the live version of this interview, if you have any questions during the interview, look underneath the video in the description field, and you'll see a link to a page on backgap.com through which you can submit your question. And I'll repeat this a couple of times during the interview for those on the live feed. And if you send your question in at the very end, we might not get to it, so try to send it in sooner. Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer. Today I'm going to be talking with two new friends, kind of Insta friends, you might say. Mark Vicente, and hang on a second, I'm going to retape this because, Bonnie, I forgot to ask you how you pronounce your last name.
Peace, like peace man.
Oh, like peace, brother.
Yep.
Okay. I wasn't sure whether it was Piesse or peace or whatever. All right. Welcome
Rick,
to...
Rick, sorry, Rick, just one thing. I can't see you anymore. Do you know why?
What do you see?
I just see full frame, either me or Bonnie.
It's probably because let me click it onto a different...
I see Rick.
You do?
Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I do.
That's okay. If you see Rick, that's cool. Then we're good.
Yeah, you know what I look like.
I know what you look like.
Okay, so far we have 14 people. Hi 14 people. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's now 19 people. There's a way to send in questions if you have one during the interview. Look in the description field beneath the interview and you'll see a link to the question page. Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer. This is our 17th season of interviewing spiritually awakening people. There are over 700 of these on the website, batgap.com, and on the YouTube channel. So if this is new to you, check out the previous ones. The whole thing is supported by appreciative listeners and viewers. There are no ads anywhere except that little, at the beginning of the YouTube video, there's an ad which you can skip. But we don't run them during the podcast. This morning I was listening to a podcast in the shower and some whole bunch of ads came on and I couldn't switch it because I was all wet, and I thought, I'm so glad I didn't put ads in my podcast. Anyway, we're supported by appreciative listeners and viewers, so if you appreciate it and would like to support it, there are PayPal buttons on every page of the site and a page with alternatives to PayPal. My guests today are Mark Vicente and Bonnie Peace. They're going to read or tell us their little bio sketches in a minute, but let me tell you how this arrangement came about. So 15 and 13 years ago, I interviewed a fellow named Bentinho Massaro twice, and then 2 years after the second interview, I took his interviews down because I realized he was kind of going off the rails, and I engaged in some email correspondence with him, and along with several spiritual teachers, and he would write very long responses to emails, which kind of my eyes would glaze over. But at one point, he said, "I'm perfect, and I don't make any mistakes." So I thought, all right, that's the end of this attempt, and I moved on. But in any case, a couple of months ago, someone brought to my attention that there was a series about him on YouTube called Insta by a fellow named Mark Vicente. So I started listening to it and found it fascinating, especially since I knew Bentinho. And I've listened to all the episodes. And then as I got to know Mark, I reached out to him and we ended up having a couple of nice phone conversations. And I decided I would like to interview him. And then I realized that he was the filmmaker of What the BLEEP Do We Know, which I had watched many years ago, and that he was also involved in the Nexium cult and in a movie called The Vow, a documentary called The Vow, as was his wife Bonnie, who's with us today. And so I watched that in its entirety. And that got me more and more fascinated with the subject of narcissism, also because Mark has recently made a movie, which I just watched yesterday, about narcissism called The Narcissist Playbook. And then I started listening to a Dr. Ramani, who features in that film, who's an expert in narcissism. And the reason this interests me so is that for years I've been concerned about the issue of spiritual teachers misbehaving and taking advantage of their students, sexually, financially, working them to death without pay, things like that. And that really cuts to the quick, because I regard spirituality and the aspiration towards it to be extremely precious in a person's life. And if a kind of predatory person takes advantage of that really sublime aspiration to achieve higher degrees of spirituality, it's a severe assault on something so tender and deep in a person's life. And I know people literally I knew people who have committed suicide because they were so disillusioned by being the recipients of that kind of treatment. So about 8 years ago, with a couple of friends, I helped to found an organization called the Association for Spiritual Integrity. We have over 800 members now and about 60 member organizations, and we've given presentations at Harvard Divinity School and the Parliament of World Religions and other venues. So this whole issue is, and it's puzzled me, because sometimes these spiritual teachers are really impressive in certain ways. They're charismatic, they're eloquent, they seem to radiate an aura or of Shakti or spiritual energy. And you easily get wowed by them and enamored of them. And yet then you find that behind the scenes, things are happening which are really quite unsavory and which probably would land them in jail if they were fully exposed. So, or at least would cause them to lose a lot of their followers. So I keep pondering the discrepancy between the public appearance of many spiritual teachers and their private lives, and why they could behave that way if they apparently had achieved such a high level of spiritual realization. Anyway, that's what attracted me to this whole conversation. And enough from me. I would like Bonnie and Mark to introduce themselves, and in the context of doing that in our subsequent discussion, you'll see why what they're doing is extremely relevant to what I just said. Who wants to go first?
I think Bonnie wants to go first.
You want me to go first?
Ladies first.
Hi, I'm Bonnie. I guess my labels would be I'm a singer-songwriter, sometimes actress, spiritual mentor, life coach, and cult escapee, and whistleblower. I haven't pursued talking about cults and narcissism as much as Mark has. Like, it's been a real mission for Mark, and you can say that. I kind of had a spiritual awakening that got me out of a cult, and so for me, that's what's been powerful to talk about and help people with. But yeah, the whole cult story is a huge part of my journey and an important topic. And I don't talk about it publicly that much anymore, Rick. But it feels important to talk to you about it. And also my spiritual awakening came from watching a bunch of your videos.
Oh, really?
In 2016.
Wow.
Yeah. I was obsessed. I listened to so many of them, and it led to a huge Kundalini awakening.
Cool.
That just disrupted everything.
So you're in my downline in the great cosmic multi-level marketing scheme.
Yeah, thanks for that. It made a big difference. So really, you're actually like partially responsible for the downfall of the cult.
Wow, fantastic. You know, as I was watching The Vow, the movie about the NXIVM cult, the scene came where you started to have this gut feeling that something was wrong. And I thought, okay, right on, Bonnie. She's the hero of this film, because Mark was still in it, hook, line, and sinker. And but you went against all odds, against the stream, to stand by the conviction, the intuitive conviction that was dawning in you that there was something seriously wrong there. And I commend you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I started listening to my intuition again.
To what? Your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you didn't mention, but you mentioned you've been an actress, but you've been in some Star Wars movies, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and something called My Favorite Girlfriend, alongside Tyler Johnson and Michael Nouri.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I never got. I watched the early Star Wars movies, and I think it was after Jar Jar Binks made his debut that I kind of lost interest. But so I haven't seen some of the newer ones. Okay, so Okay, so Mark, about you?
All right, so Mark Vicente, filmmaker. I was born in South Africa. I grew up in a country that was a little bit messed up. Some of you may know that. I had a lot of issues with the things I was seeing as a child. And my mom was the black sheep of the family, so she was into all kind of sort of spiritual woo-woo stuff. And so I had a lot of influence from her. I began to reject some of the more Calvinistic aspects of the religion that I was growing up with. But I became obsessed with, and I think because of the things I saw in my country, even as a child, obsessed with how to change the country, you know, as a little kid, which is kind of weird. And I had this, I guess, some kind of an awakening. I think I was 8 or 9, where I was listening to some Zulu music, and you know, which involved a bunch of drumming and stuff. And I was drumming along with it, and I had this profound something that happened in my body, this rush of energy up my spine, and I just began weeping for the joy of it. And I thought to myself, if everybody could feel this feeling, the entire country would change. And so my obsession was, how do I get everyone to feel this? And so I thought, well, I'll just build very big speakers. But I think I was 8 or 9, so that didn't work. And the speakers had to be very big because the country was quite big. And so cut to many years later, and you'll see how this ties into who I married. I saw Star Wars when I was like, let's say 13, and it blew me away. And I saw it in Lisbon with my parents, and in that moment, I was like, "Oh, this is how you reach people. You use movies." So my obsession was to become a filmmaker, and you know, I worked very hard in South Africa. You know, worked my way up the camera department. Eventually, got to Hollywood, got a bunch of big breaks. Got very, very disillusioned with Hollywood because I was just making a bunch of crap, basically, and so began dreaming up making a film that could sort of address some of the issues I cared about, and partnered up with some other people. And that film became, you know, What the Bleep Do We Know, which, you know, had a real profound impact. I think the first version we came out, part 1, was 2004. That had a really profound impact. And I'd been, you know, going from group to group to group. And based on that film, a lot of people reached out to me and said, "Hey, your film's amazing. All the stuff in your film is incredible. Like, we actually teach people how to do that." And mostly I was like, "Nah, you don't. You guys are full of it." But I got this amazing email from this woman who said, like, "We're putting together a symposium of scientists," and that was my weakness, like smart people. Fritjof Capra and this and that and whoever, all these different people. And I was like, "This sounds fascinating. And, you know, would you like to come and meet us?" And so I met them, and they seemed very, very smart. And they basically said to me, "Hey, we'd like to help you with your mission, which is to change the world through movies." And, you know, they picked me up in a Learjet and flew me all over the country to go meet a bunch of scientists and said, "We'll help you fund your movies." And I was like, "This is super exciting." And bit by bit, they enrolled me in their particular organization and their particular methodology and their particular tech, you know, which that was around 2005, 2006. And then 12 years later, through the help of my amazing wife, I realized, oh, this is a really, really bad organization, and the leader's doing really, really terrible things to especially the women in the organization. And in 2017, we began our work to dismantle it and take it down, and eventually got law enforcement involved. It took a while. Massive federal trial, and the leader is now in prison for 120 years. He served 5 years of 120 years, so he will die in prison. That's the very fast version of, like, that brings us to the point.
Yeah, I was riveted by the vow. I didn't realize the extent to which you and Bonnie were featured in it until I started watching it, and then I just really got into it. And also, you know, Sarah Edmondson and Nippy Ames, who I've started listening to their podcast, a little bit culty, and would like to have them on Batcap sometime. But it was very educational for me. So
dark as well, very dark.
Yeah,
It's a rough ride.
yeah. But it took a lot of courage, actually, because you know, there was a lot of peer pressure for you not to blow the whistle like this, and a lot of people who were, you know, thought you were crazy and so on. And there was a lot of legal attacks. I think at one point you were kind of underground so that you couldn't be served subpoenas or something because they were going after you. So
For quite a while, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I commend you on your courage and persistence. And I think the whole thing, I told you this in one of our phone calls, but you know, I kind of had the feeling like you had to go through that in order to make this movie and to educate yourself on the new movie you've made, and because it's really going to help a lot of people. And you couldn't have done it if you had just examined it objectively from the outside. You wouldn't have had the intimate appreciation of how these things work that you now do.
100%, 100%. It was actually Bonnie was the one who gave me the idea to make Narcissist Playbook.
Great.
I think it was after the trial, end of 2019, because she was the one that was explaining to me, you know, having me read articles and look at different movies and things. And she said, you should make a film about narcissism. I was like, that's a great idea. You know, so I partnered up with some of my producer friends. But it's been a long ride. We've taken 5 years to make this film. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason that it was so important, and Bonnie said, like, she's not as interested in these topics as I became obsessed with. Part of the reason I wanted to make the film was because in some ways I was trying to answer the question for myself, like, how did I get fooled?
Yeah.
How did I not see this? And I realized part of the reason is because I was never trained to see these things. So I began, you know, reading and listening to people that were narcissists and psychopaths to see how they operated. And to some degree, that making the film has been therapy because, you know, I interview 4 self-confessed narcissists who basically tell me what they feel, how they operate, what they don't feel, what they do to people, why they do it to people, why they like doing it to people. And in some ways, those were proxy interviews because my cult leader never admitted anything. In fact, he maintains to this day a sort of messianic delusion about him being a very special human being that's just misunderstood. In fact, he reached out to me from prison a few years ago via somebody else saying, you know, I'd like you to tell the judge you made a mistake. That's the level of delusion we're dealing with. You know.
Oh, sure, yeah. Keith, anything you say.
Yeah. After that whole fight.
Right. Get right on it. So let's not presume that everybody understands what narcissism is. And as much as I've, you know, studied it, which is 1% of how much you've studied it, I still don't feel that I appreciate all of its nuances and as much as I would like to. So let's lay it out for people. What is narcissism?
Yeah, so the DSM-5, diagnostic statistical, I don't know, DSM-5, whatever
the
it is.
thing doctors use
the thing doctors
keep track of all this stuff.
They have these 9 criteria, and they say if you have 5 of these 9 things, and I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I can't memorize them, so I have them up here. There's an acronym called Special Me. So number 1, sense of self-importance. Number 2, preoccupation with power, beauty, or success. Number 3, they're entitled. Number 4, can only be around people who are important or special. 5, interpersonally exploitative for their own gain. 6, arrogant. 7, lack empathy. 8, must be admired. And 9, envious of others or believe that others are envious of them. So they say if a person displays 5 out of these 9 on a consistent basis, likely they have narcissistic personality disorder. So that's basically what it is.
Okay, and as Dr. Ramani said, and she's someone we'll probably be referring to throughout this interview, and she's in your film. She's an expert on narcissism. There's a spectrum. You know, you're not either narcissist or not narcissist. There are degrees of it, and you know, degrees of severity. Right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had a slight change of heart about some of that because I've spoken to a lot of clinicians now. There's one particular person who's done a meta study, and they say, "Look, you're either a predator or you're not." And I was like, "Okay, that's kind of binary, but that's kind of true." I think the issue with the spectrum discussion is that sometimes people say, "Well, everybody has narcissism," and I don't think that's true. Like, I think that you can have a healthy ego, you can have ego boundaries. That doesn't mean you're narcissistic, you know. Narcissism implies a kind of fragile ego that wants to do to others whatever it wants to do in order to maintain that false sense of self. And I don't think that's the case with everybody, you know. So that's my only thought on that one, you know. But yes,
but once you get into narcissism territory, then there's a spectrum of mild, medium, and severe. Yeah,
absolutely, all the way up to like dark tetrad territory. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Do you think that narcissists tend to be more abundant in certain communities or organizations than in the general population?
Yes. Yes.
And Hollywood.
Yeah, Hollywood. Politics comes to mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in spirituality, when I look at leadership in spirituality, Look, I think there's some people that have latent tendencies and they suddenly have some kind of awakening in something and something gets fired up. And this is something Bonnie and I talk about a lot. You know, we can talk about this in great detail because we're fascinated at this. And then there are some that they see the amount of fuel that they can get in the spiritual world. And so they mimic or model, you know, some kind of a spiritual leader in order to get that power. I think there's lots of ways it shows up, but there's a lot of it in spirituality, a lot.
Yeah. Do you think that narcissists tend to rise to positions of leadership or authority, or are they content to be followers or mere members?
Oh, they crave it. They
Crave the authority.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they would be restless if they had to just be one of the foot soldiers. They kind of need to climb the ranks of the hierarchy.
Yeah, because they're, you know, they're being underappreciated if they're just following. You know, nobody understands my greatness. You know, so I got to work my way to the top. And I also think they desperately need control. And I think in the most severe cases, you know, when they have messianic delusions, they need to be God, and they need to have subjects. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The best place to get power is leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, and in spiritual communities, I mean, you literally have people waving puja lamps in front of you and washing your feet in some cases and giving you flowers and prostrating and all that stuff. And unless you're a really humble person, that can go to your head.
Right.
That's interesting. I wonder about that a lot. You know that the old adage that, you know, money is the root of all evil.
Uh-huh.
I don't believe that. I believe that it may expose who you really are. And I do wonder about that adoration. Like, I feel like it exposes like who you are, I think.
Yeah.
Because like some people are terrified
too,
of. Yeah.
But it's kind of written into the formula in some cases in spirituality. You know, you're supposed to honor the guru as God. Literally, the scriptures say that.
And Keith Raniere, as far as I understand, actually sent someone into an ashram. You might know more about that, Mu. Sent someone into an ashram to look at the guru. Yeah, he was getting ideas.
I think he then went to the ashram.
Did he?
And then he began to diddle try to with a bunch of the female students, and he was kicked out.
Of course he did.
Of course he did.
Keith did, or his emissary?
I think he did. As far as I know, he went, and then he apparently he was so enamored by the amount of power the guru had, but then he started to try to diddle some of the female students, and at that point they kicked him out.
Yeah. In one of our phone conversations, I was telling you about this idea that Joan Shiver Pita Harrigan, whom I interviewed years ago, explained to me, which is you can have a genuine spiritual awakening, but the kundalini, if you want to explain it in those terms, can get sidetracked and into what is called a deflected rising, where it has risen up through the series of chakras without having fully purified each one, such that you are gifted with eloquence and charisma and intellectual brilliance and other such qualities, even siddhis, if you know what siddhis are, kind of supernatural powers. But you are not enlightened, even though you are convinced you are, and you give the impression to others that you are. And so inevitably there's a downfall when this has happened. I don't think this is necessarily universally an explanation for some of these charismatic teachers, but I think it very often may be in some of the cases.
I wonder though, kind of like what Mark was saying, I think a lot of psychopaths will have, get into these realms and have awakenings. And of course they get all that power or whatever with the kundalini. But I feel like kind of then a psychopath will go and do a certain thing with it, where someone who didn't have that mentality wouldn't ever do that. I wonder if it does just reveal what was there and it kind of plays out differently. Yeah,
I think you've got something there, because not everybody experiences, a huge explosion of grandiosity. They don't all develop this sort of mega spiritual ego. It doesn't go to their heads. They manage to remain humble, and they manage to realize that they still are a work in progress, and they continue to, work on purifying and refining and, their whole mind-body behavioral system.
Yeah. I mean, in my awakening, for sure, I had a moment where I was like, that's it. That's everything. We're done here. Like, all good. So I for sure had that moment. But there was nothing in me that wanted to go and start like exploiting people. So that's interesting for me, that with some people it would really ignite that in them.
Yeah. So we're actually answering some of the questions I had written down by talking about this stuff. But so one point we may have covered now is that spiritual communities might be particularly vulnerable to having narcissistic leaders, and because narcissists are attracted to a community in which they're going to be admired and praised and, even worshipped and so on, and in which they are considered to be infallible. I mean, I mentioned that thing about Bentinho saying he never made mistakes. There's another guy who I had interviewed years ago, and he was my second most popular interview, but I took it down because a couple of people had visited his ashram in Mexico and were lucky to get out of there with their lives. They had had medical emergencies which were ignored, and they kind of saw the back room dynamics of what was happening. And it was like, if you're working in the kitchen, you wanted to try a different kind of salad dressing. Oh, no, we have to check with the leader. Only he can make decisions. He knows best. We can't think for ourselves. People were literally saying that. That was baked into the culture.
Yeah. Total control.
We had the same thing.
Did you?
Yeah, well, a lot of people, I mean, Bonnie and I found this. We'd say, well, what if we do such and such? And they'd say, we have to ask Keith. I'm like, why? Like, we're going to go fly somewhere or travel somewhere, and I have to ask Keith if I can go. Like, why? Like, why do you have to ask him? Just go.
Yeah.
We were very puzzled by why there was so much checking with him.
And I guess for the women who were close to him, they actually did have to check. Like, they would get severely punished if they hadn't checked with him. They actually, according to their vow or whatever to him, they needed to get his permission.
Huh. So there will be a number of points in this conversation in which I might want to pause and say, okay, what's the lesson here for somebody who might be in a spiritual organization or thinking of getting into one? What can we do to give them the spidey sense to spot this kind of thing if it exists and, not get involved? So based upon what we've said so far, like, what are the clearest warning signs that someone is using spirituality as a cover for narcissistic control that people can add to their toolbox so as not to be taken advantage of?
Yeah. I can think of one thing that's kind of intuitive, because I've experienced this with multiple cults or like situations where there's someone controlling things, is it's just a feeling of tenseness. Everyone's kind of
uncomfortable, unpleasant.
Yeah, like everyone's kind of uptight. It's like you can feel the control. It's palpable. And it very much feels like, everyone's referring back to the leader. I would say that's one thing, just that. And not that people can't be stressed and tense, for other reasons, but it's like the organism has a control feeling.
Yeah. Okay. Mark, do you want to add to that?
I mean, that's actually a great one, because I've been thinking about, you don't realize it when you're inside, but like you're walking on eggshells constantly, because there are all these, it's funny, Ranieri even talked about this, invisible barriers. Like he once wrote this paper about when you have a dog with those electric fence things, and eventually, the dog doesn't run because it gets zapped, and then eventually you don't need the fence anymore. And I was thinking, but that's kind of what he did with us. So there are these edicts. Some of them are not explicit, but you can't do certain things. And everybody's very careful with their language. I see it even today in culture. Everybody's terrified to step out of line. That is a huge red flag. Like, step out of line, what line? Like, why? Why can't you just be free to say whatever? Why can't we discuss ideas? So I do think that's a huge thing. And also, if you go against the narrative, do you get punished? Do you get ostracized? Do you get shunned? And most people don't realize, because they're so entrained to the narrative, that they don't realize there is a narrative. They just think this is just the way that they are. But if you break, you push against the prevailing narrative, there are consequences, that's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
Huge problem.
Even with a question.
Even with a question, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. One thing that I've really come to appreciate, having been in two rather cult-like organizations and having interviewed all these people and become aware of all these groups and all this stuff, is the importance of cultivating critical thinking capacities or skills on the spiritual path. Which doesn't mean you have to be skeptical of everything, but it means you have to, like you were just describing, feel free to analyze and dissect and discern and discriminate and play with ideas and not take anything just because someone says it. In fact, there's a quote from the Buddha. He said something like, don't believe something just because it's in some old book or because someone says it, or even if I said it, don't believe it. You know, just kind of use your mind, use your own discernment to see if it measures up or not and against your own experience.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We should be, I mean, you should. Here's the other thing that's funny. In our particular, in NXIVM, we were taught critical thinking. We were taught logic skills. We were taught all those things. But it was in there's a cult expert called Yanil Lalich, and she wrote a book called Bounded Choice, which I think is a very accurate term. So you're doing critical thinking in a bounded area, but don't go outside that area to do critical thinking.
Right.
You know, so you think you're very logical, and there are different organizations that think that they're very good thinkers. But they're very good thinkers inside the box, but not outside the box, and they're not philosophically adaptable to where they can step outside the box and question the box.
Yeah. You couldn't have said to whoever was leading the critical thinking class, okay, like in today's class, let's analyze everything Keith Raniere says and decide whether or not it's valid. That wouldn't
Absolutely not. You'd get thrown out, Rick.
You'd get thrown out, and you'd be called a suppressive. Like
Yeah.
you're having suppressive thoughts. Like anytime you had any negative thought about the leader, that was suppressive.
Yeah.
You're like, what do you mean that was? What are you talking about? I can't have doubts. No. Why? Because, well, he's the greatest example of ethics that's ever lived. So you're now questioning ethics.
That's where the gaslighting is too, because then it's turned back on you. Of like, you might want to look at what your issue is that you have to question there.
Yeah. Like there's something wrong with you because you're doubting. You're doubting Thomas.
Yeah,
Yes.
not just giving tribute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, as we go along here, don't limit yourself to responding to questions I think to ask. If something comes to mind and you want to go off on that, on some tangent or something, it's fine with me.
I do actually want to bring one thing
Yeah,
up
go ahead.
that Bonnie and I have discussed at great length. And Rick, I brought it up to you, I think, in a phone conversation. We both assumed for many years that spiritual enlightenment or some kind of a peak experience or some kind of awakening implied morality and goodness.
Oh man, this is a big one. Keep going.
Right? And Bonnie and I really felt this. And then we began to question, like, well, what if that's not true? Which was a huge thing for us. Because I had a conversation with Raniere once where I said, he said to me something like, well, what if you just abandoned, morality? And I was like, okay, let me try that. So, and I went into a very deep place in meditation inside myself. And when I reached in there, I felt love. And so the next day I took a walk with him and I said, well, I could abandon morality and I can go deep inside and I experience love, and therefore morality emerges out of that place. And he was like, oh yeah, of course. And later I realized he was full of shit. He didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But the experience that Bonnie and I have had of deep connection, there is connection with all things. There is a feeling of goodness that's so sublime that sometimes there's tears. And so we never thought that those experiences don't imply morality and are not about, being good. That what if a psychopath can have them? And that was a pretty big deal for us to understand that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bonnie, did you want to add?
Just that it's still hard for me to understand. Like, I've seen now many cases where I think people have had awakenings, and then gone to do horrific things. And so, yeah, in my experience of going within, like what Mark was saying, it just kind of cracks open gratitude and appreciation and love and all of that. And so for me, it's still hard to imagine that, like, if someone's feeling that, then how does that cause them to go and do horrific things? But I do think that's a reality.
Yeah. My answer to that, and I've given it a lot of thought too, is that awakening is not an absolute term. There are degrees of awakening, and there's no end to it. And, you know, having had some profound awakening doesn't mean that you've completely purified your whole personality and your whole mind-body system.
Yeah.
There's one of my favorite quotes is from the Buddhist sage Padmasambhava, who said, although my awareness is as vast as the sky, my attention to karma is as fine as a grain of barley flour. So, I mean...
Totally.
Yeah. So he's saying basically, hey, I'm a pretty cosmic dude, but I could screw up, you know, so I have to be careful.
Yeah. And it heightens everything. It kind of puts a magnifying glass on everything.
Yeah.
For sure.
So perhaps the takeaway point from this one is, well, Carlos Castaneda's teacher, if he was a real person, said something similar. He said a warrior, by which he meant a spiritual aspirant, has time only for his impeccability. And he was constantly emphasizing self-scrutiny and precision and being careful in your behavior, not being sloppy or taking liberties.
Yeah, you know, Rick, you mentioned anything that comes to mind. I want to quickly go back to something that you talked about. Well, what are the warning signs that you can see? And I do think there's something else, and this is not a popular one for some people. But I look at sort of codependency. I'm not a fan of that word, but I look at, in different times of my life, I was looking for somebody to give me the answer to all the internal confusion. Maybe a big daddy or a big mommy or a big something or a big angel or a big whatever. And so I think there's also that, like when you find yourself in a situation, whether the thing in front of you is good or bad, but you're looking to that symbol as though that is your salvation, as though you are nothing and that is everything, that's a huge warning sign. You know, whether or not the thing is good or bad, that opens you up to so much potential abuse because you've literally, the locus of control is so far outside of yourself and somebody else is the salvation. And I think that's super dangerous.
Yeah, it's a good one. This kind of relates to what you just said. In spiritual communities, you know, people are inclined to be or are trained to be compassionate, non-judgmental, and forgiving. And this might tend to increase their vulnerability. So, you know, let's discuss like how those qualities could actually be manipulated by a narcissistic teacher.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's where the self-gaslighting kicks in. So within the system, it's like the gaslighting happens where, for example, as we were saying, if you question the leader, then it's turned on you of how is this your issue? And the fingers are all pointing at you. And within that kind of a system, you are super encouraged to be responsible and to look at yourself and like really take responsibility for things and doubt yourself actually. And there's this self-gaslighting that kicks in, which doesn't allow you to actually see what's in front of you. Because if you see something, you'll immediately be like, well, but how am I doing this? Like, how am I responsible? And so that doesn't allow you to actually point the finger where it needs to be pointed.
Yeah. Another way I would put it is that there's very often an explicit teaching that the teacher in a group knows best and sort of has the enlightened vision, and thereby implicitly you're encouraged to doubt your own vision. If this teacher is doing something that you consider to be off kilter, you're likely to think, well, but he's supposed to be enlightened and I'm not, so who am I to say? I guess I'll just keep sitting here and it must be crazy wisdom or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also like this thing about, I was just thinking about this, thou shalt not judge. Why not? Who said that? Who said you shouldn't judge? Well, if you're judgmental, you're not a good person. Who said Who said that those things, two things equal each other? They don't equal each other. So that's interesting to me. Like, you know, I've seen people leave, like, let's say Calvinistic religions. Then they go and embrace some new age whatever. It's basically the same pattern. You know, I shouldn't judge. I shouldn't judge. Everybody's, you know, everybody deserves a fair this, that, or the other. Instead of saying, as with Bonnie and I, now that we're out of these situations, we're like, no, call a shitty thing. Like, if you are unable to, like, use your moral compass and decide what's good and bad, like, that's a huge problem, you know.
Actually, Raniere told me that I was the most judgmental person he'd ever met.
Oh, congratulations.
Now I take it as a compliment.
Yeah.
But he was very serious that was a really bad thing.
I suppose there could be healthy and unhealthy forms of judgmentalism. You know, a person could have really good discrimination and think, oh, no, something off here. You know, this is wrong. Or on the other hand, they might just be bad-mouthing everybody and everything.
Oh, for sure.
You know, making a scene.
Yeah, but the act of just having discretion, I don't think that's bad. I mean, also, there's words for bad judgment, you know, like, what's the word? You know, I'm not thinking of the right word, but, like, you know, if you're racist and you assume all people of this, you know, persuasion are this, whatever, that's a stupid kind of judgment.
Yeah.
I think discretion,
Prejudice.
though. Yeah, prejudice, thank you very much. Couldn't think of the word. Discretion is very, very important. And I feel like, especially when you know, we first enter the world of spirituality, you know, we're swimming in all this ocean of wonderfulness and stuff, and, like, discretion sometimes goes out the window, you know, because people use the right words, or they, you know, sing the right song or whatever, and it's all just very floaty. And I think there's something about growing up, individuating, and, like, having a real sense of yourself and what you like and what you don't like. I mean, it's one of the things that anybody who's ever left a cult or left an abusive relationship, especially narcissically abusive, the therapist will often say to them, what do you like? What do you not like? And they can't say it first because they don't know, because the compass has gone offline. And so they have to try to refine the compass and refine what they like and what they don't like, because often, let's say in a cult, the thing that was bad, they were told was good. Like them not having boundaries and being abused, they told was good. But objectively, it's bad, and they have to refine that distinction, you know?
Yeah. You want to comment on that, Bonnie, or are you good for now?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the boundaries thing, because towards the end, when I was starting to try to fade out and plan my exit, I started having more boundaries. And they were working us around the clock, like 23 hours a day at one point for me. And so we'd be in these trainings, and then after the trainings, there would be this obligation to, you know, have a meeting or do something else. And I remember one training, I was in a team, and they were like, we're all going to meet, you know, at lunchtime. And I said, no, I'm not going to come. And then there was like this silence, like, oh, talk about tension, like, oh, she's not going to come. And then I got some feedback from a higher rank later, via a message saying, you know, you might want to look at this because it came across as very rigid. And I know that you're trying to, you know, reach the next level on the Stripe path, which was kind of the career path. And that was really used against me, of like, if you want to get to the next level, you can't have a boundary.
One thing you said just there is this sleep deprivation thing. A lot of cults use that, where everybody gets exhausted, and then you're more malleable, you're weaker, you know, you're foggier, you don't have clear judgment, more easily manipulated.
Totally. Yeah, you're not right in your head at that point. You can't think things through, and you're very wishy-washy, very people can definitely control you more at that point.
And another thought that comes to mind, I've heard you guys discuss it, and I've also thought it over the years, is that people who get involved in cults, first of all, they don't know they're in a cult, but generally. But secondly, they're not necessarily bug-eyed zombies. they could be very highly educated, accomplished, intelligent, creative people who've already done significant things in their lives, but they've gotten sucked into this thing without even realizing that it is malignant in some way. And I guess you two would just define yourselves that way in the NXIVM thing. So let's address that thing, because a lot of people might be thinking, well, this would never happen to me, you know, because I have a PhD in chemistry or something, and you know, I've had a successful business. I couldn't get drawn into a cult.
Mm.
Yeah. Was it Yanya Lalich who said, you just haven't met your cult yet?
Yeah. 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 You know, it's funny. Everybody has people in intelligence, CIA, NSA, whatever. They understand everybody has their weakness. Everybody has the thing that where they'll break, or the thing that they want. And so they'll use whatever leverage based on, they'll do an analysis of a person. They'll use whatever leverage they can. If this person, maybe family's everything to them, or this is everything, or they're very, very ambitious. You know, ambitious people can be played. So they figure out like what you want. They're very, very smart people, scientists. Let's say, for instance, and some intelligence agency wants to get them. They just figure out what they want. You know, are they in debt? What's the situation? What do they want? Fame. So in the case of, you know, cults, they do study people. They studied me. They had meetings about me. They read anything I'd ever written, any interview I'd done.
You mean before
stuff.
you came in, they were learning about you in order to lure you in?
They spent a weekend profiling me.
Wow.
To figure out what I want. And in that case, what I wanted, more than anything, is I wanted to find a way to make the films that I thought would impact the world. And I was at the top of my game. I just made What the Bleep. It was out in the world. People were like, there was accolades all over, but like I wanted more. I wanted to have more reach. And this was my mission in life. And so they figured out what my mission was. Didn't matter whether I was smart or not. I had a yearning. It was almost a limbic yearning for something. They figured out what it was, and they offered me my dream. So I think that no matter how intelligent you are, if intelligence agencies can profile you and find your weakness, so can a cult. It's you know, it's not that different. So everybody has something that they need, something that some place they can be gotten. And so the way I talk about it is, you know, some people say they get you by the balls. They got me by my values, in my case. My dreams, the things I wanted to do, the way I wanted to be an artist, the way I wanted to use my art to improve the world. That's where they got me. You know, for Bonnie, it was different. I mean, for everybody, it's different. But I don't think anybody's immune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to say anything, Bonnie, before I ask another question?
Yeah, just that we all have different areas of lives, like some where we're strong and clear and confident, and others where we're feeling lost. And so like one person could have an amazing career and be at the top of their game, and yet they struggle with something in relationships, or maybe they're just feeling empty and they're, you know, spiritually seeking. And I feel like those are the points where we're vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because we're open, we're looking.
Another thing about cults is that they have concentric circles. So the outermost circle might be the public facade that they want people to see, and it can seem so attractive and interesting and all that. But if you could go right to the innermost circle, you could see all kinds of crazy things going on, like in the case of, you know, NXIVM women literally being branded with some kind of a hot iron, or, you know, in Bentinho's case, all these drunken parties and whatnot that go on. There was a funny story in one of the Instaguru things about Bentinho where he had been up all night smoking cigars and drinking, and the next morning he had some expensive retreat. He had to, $15,000 for the weekend or something. He was supposed to be there and give the talk, and somebody was, I forget the guy's name, was trying to wake Keelan was trying to wake him up. You know, come on, man, you got to get downstairs. It's time for the meeting. He was like, oh, leave me alone. And you know, finally he got him to get up, and he went downstairs, and he just. you know, he was hungover. He sat in his chair with his eyes closed for about half an hour, and everybody in the audience was like, "Whoa, man! Look at that's really cosmic. Feel the vibes, really profound." You know, he was just trying to get.
Because he took a nap.
Yeah, he was just trying to wake up so he could talk.
It's
So
actually,
anyway,
it's actually interesting, that moment as well, because, you know, he just stared, he kind of closed his eyes, and then sometimes he stared at people. And I thought it was interesting because this is us, you know, like the good people are busy projecting all kinds of stuff onto the person. Like, oh my God, he's so deep, he's so still, is like this endless pond of still water or lake or whatever. And I keep thinking about, and Bonnie and I talk about this a lot, like we're literally exporting who we are and our experiences into some other person who may or may not be feeling those things. And this is the other thing about the certainty that some of these leaders have. You know, we look at the certainty. Now, the certainty might be psychopathy. It might be a complete lack of anxiety. Psychopathy at the extremes, there's no anxiety whatsoever. So we look at that, and I believe that I mistook that for depth and profound spiritual awareness. And then later I realized, wait, I was exporting my own depth and my own spiritual awareness on a block of concrete, basically, thinking that the concrete was deep and profound because it had no anxiety, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
That is good news as well, because that means, like, oh, if I'm the projector and I'm projecting myself, then I am that thing already, perhaps not expressed as I'd like to yet, but I have it. They don't. That's the good news, you know.
Yeah. I actually formulated a question about that. Could narcissism imbue people with spiritual intensity or confidence, which might be mistaken for genuine realization? How can a community distinguish between healthy confidence in a teacher and narcissistic grandiosity?
That's a good question. I don't know. I just want to say, like, healthy confidence feels grounded to me somehow. Whereas with a narcissistic person, you can feel like there's a real attachment, like a need to get the admiration or something that feels different to me.
I like that. I think there's a show with that kind of narcissistic impulse. There's a show. Like, I've been in a bunch of different spiritual groups where sometimes the leader will come in. It's a massive show, and there's like sound and music and lights and whatever and chanting, and versus like somebody who's just who might be very still. And I do think there's a frequency thing as well, like the frequency of like, how does it feel? You know, not the frequency of you projecting a bunch of stuff on somebody that's not there, but like, how does it feel being in that person's presence? Because one of the things that they talk about in narcissistic abusive relationships, when it comes to romantic relationships, you'll hear therapists say to somebody, if you feel this terrified excitement when you're around somebody, that's not necessarily healthy. Like, you think that's love. That's not love. That's passion and lust and terror and a whole bunch of things all together. If you're feeling that kind of giddiness around somebody, I don't know if that's good.
Yeah. Another thought that comes to mind is, I think if a person could have a lot of confidence and presence and so on, but it would speak for itself. They wouldn't have to brag about it. They wouldn't have to say, I am the greatest ever, nobody could do this as well as I can, and, you know, that kind of stuff, which, you know, we can think of examples in politics where politicians sometimes talk that way, one in particular.
But here's the thing, like, let's take that one in particular for a second. That's obvious, though. That's easy.
Yeah,
and
so blatant.
grandiose narcissism, that's easy. It's the covert stuff. It's the communal narcissism. It's the people that run, you know, NGOs and charities and like do all these good things. That's the tough stuff to spot. And we know that because they get unmasked at some point. You know, somebody who ran some benevolent thing turns out to be a complete schmuck. That's the stuff that's more difficult to uncover. And in the case of Raniere, he never boasted personally. He had other people boast for him.
Yeah,
about his IQ and his concert pianist and all that business.
All that stuff. Oh my
Right,
God.
he wasn't saying it. For the most part, it was all the people who had been trained to just say how amazing he was, how amazing.
Do you think narcissism, or at least a certain dose of it could ever be an asset that would enable you to be successful in a field where otherwise you wouldn't be?
Yeah, I think we need some of it to be successful for sure.
Huh.
Like as a performer, I'm thinking, I guess in some ways I do really enjoy or being on set or something, but I actually find it challenging getting tons and tons of attention, like whereas some other actors might walk in and they just love it, like they lap it up.
Yeah.
And so for them it's fuel. And so their career is going to go further than mine in some ways. Not to say that I don't have like some narcissistic traits either, but like on that scale, I think, yeah, you'll get a great acting career if you're just soaking it up.
Huh.
There's also something to be said for a certain amount of delusion, you know? Because you can sometimes achieve the impossible because you have this impossible dream and everyone's telling you it's not possible. You go, it's possible. You guys are idiots. I'm going to do it. There's something to be said for that self-belief, you know, like radical self-belief. I don't know that it's bad. I mean, I would have to look at the quality of what is their dream, you know? Does their dream involve like harming other people? But like sometimes I think there's a certain amount of delusion that might be very, very good. Because if you take into account all the different obstacles that stand in your way, you'll just get frozen. So there's that.
Yeah. I'm just watching a documentary about Live Aid, which was this big concert that took place in 1985 to raise money for the starving people in Ethiopia. And it was spearheaded by a guy named Bob Geldof, who was kind of a medium-level rock star whose career was fading. And he just bullied and lied and pushed, and he was just driven by this thing because he was so moved by the plight of these people in Africa. And he, against all odds, he got this huge thing accomplished. But if he had been more, mild-mannered and honest and whatnot, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, or if you're willing to walk over people to get there as well, a narcissist would be fine with knocking.
I mean, he had all these rock bands lined up, or he didn't have any lined up, and he kept telling all the other ones that all the other ones had been lined up, and so then they got on board because he said that they were, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I do think, though, in the case of presidents, pretty much, I think it's universal. You have to have a high level of narcissism to be a president or a prime minister or whatever,
So you think Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. It doesn't mean just because you're a narcissist that you're like, you're evil.
Yeah.
But you have to have a high level of confidence. And sometimes confidence that's impenetrable,
Well, confidence is a good quality. It doesn't. I don't know if there's necessarily a Venn diagram overlap between confidence and narcissism. Is there? Can't you be an extremely confident person and not be a narcissist?
Yeah, I think healthy confidence. I don't think there has to be an overlap, but I think that. How should I put this politely? I think I mentioned my dad was in intelligence.
Oh yes, like a South African CIA kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So I think that presidents are also, they have their squad that presents them a certain way. I don't think any presidents are squeaky clean. They have to maybe appear squeaky clean, and there's a lot of people that do a lot of cleanup, and they have to make some pretty radical decisions. It's funny, we were talking about this the other day. I'm terrified of that level of power. Terrified.
Of that level of power.
Oh my God! Just think about like you make a decision and 100,000 people die. Like that's just, I can't live with that stuff.
I was also thinking, like in the case of our war, quote unquote, I guess it was a war.
Oh, we've won it so many times, but it seems to keep happening.
Yeah, but like in bringing down NXIVM or getting justice.
Oh, your war. I was thinking the
yeah.
one in Iran.
Oh, yeah, well, there's lots of wars. But our personal one,
right.
I won't name names, but there were a bunch of narcissistic people who were a part of bringing it down. I think they're narcissistic, but it was needed. It's like sometimes it takes a certain kind of person to be dog-headed and just like take down another narcissist. It's interesting.
Takes a thorn to remove a thorn, as they say.
Kind of.
Yeah, like a sensitive empath would not be as brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, imagine someone like General George Patton being a sort of a sensitive empath probably wouldn't have worked.
No, no.
Right.
No, exactly. I think though, I think that just to go back to spirituality, I think that the damage though with these people, there's a kind of opening yourself up on a very deep level, perhaps a soul level. And so when you get harmed in this area, it cuts to the sort of the very existential self, and the hurt is so profound. I mean, I certainly understand that people in romantic relationships get hurt and it can affect their ideas of love and everything, but I feel there's something about spiritual abuse that is so profound, the pain and the hurt that it causes, that some people don't recover. And, Bonnie and I have friends who've been through stuff like they just throw everything out and they never go back. They never want to know anything about source, universe, awakening, anything. Mm-hmm. It's just dead to them. And that's very sad.
Yeah, that's what I was saying in the beginning when I was introducing our talk today. It's like I still believe that spirituality is the most fundamental and pivotal level on which we could influence the world. And if people are abusing their spiritual authority in a teachership role, they kind of sabotage that effort, which has serious implications for the future of humanity. Not to sound grandiose.
Yeah, it's like the deepest wound that there is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, I just took it to a world level, but on an individual level, we might believe that our spiritual evolution or enlightenment is the most precious thing that we could attain. And if that is being thwarted or destroyed by somebody, and if you believe in karma, some pretty bad karma in there.
Yeah, and also let's take, I don't know, a leader or a priest or something, who becomes, let's say, the representative of the divine or the representative of God.
Right.
When that person does bad things, for somebody who believes in a God, then God is a cruel, merciless son of a bitch who should not be dealt with anymore.
Right.
And that door is now closed.
Yeah.
That's just sad.
It really is. And that's one of my big motivations in doing this show and in establishing the ASI. I just feel like anything that can be done to prevent that kind of harm should be done.
Yeah.
A question came. Oh, I'm sorry, Bonnie. You want to say something?
No, go ahead.
A question came in. But maybe you want to say what you want to say before we get off on a different topic?
You're very good at tracking when there's a little something that wants to come through.
Well, you kind of took a breath. I was thinking, okay.
Yeah, it was a passing thought. But I was just remembering before we actually really woke up and saw what was happening in Nexium, both Mark and I did have a sense that some things were really wrong. And Nancy Solzman had been very abusive to me and triggered a whole bunch of PTSD, and we were troubled about this.
She was Keith Raniere's right-hand person.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Mark and I were troubled about it, and we saw a movie. Do you remember, Moo, which movie it was? Spotlight, exactly. So it was about... Paul
Catholic Church.
Giamatti or whatever his name is, Catholic Church. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, exactly. And so we hadn't pieced together that we were in like a religious cult or anything.
Right.
At that point, but we saw that movie and it really registered for both of us, and we were like, whoa, it's like we're in an abusive church.
Yeah.
And that was kind of one of the pieces that started to fall apart for us. Yeah. Good
one. A question came in from a fellow named Christopher Slaymaker, and he actually sent me an email this morning. I think I'll read it. He said, "Hi, Rick and Irene. I was just going to get on here and recommend Mark Vicente. What a fun synchronicity," because he just saw on the website that I was going to interview you today. He said, "I think his work and his documentaries are so nourishing and relevant right now. I remember seeing your first interview with Bentinho Massaro and being so excited by the prospect of an enlightened guy younger than me for a fresh perspective on it, but I never kept up with his work. But it was still so shocking and disturbing to see how this kind of extreme narcissism can totally co-opt an awakening. I knew stuff like this was happening, but I feel a little naive now. Not only does it illuminate how I've been vulnerable to narcissists, which can be so confusing, but it also sheds light on my own much milder forms of spiritual arrogance. Such a clarifying moment. Thank you." And then his
That's
question,
awesome.
which he just sent in, is, do you think someone like Bentinho or Keith could ever snap out of it and just be honest?
Don't we wish?
I think it's a beautiful question. And it's a beautiful question because it assumes a kind of redemption
Yeah.
that it's Christopher, right? It's
Christopher, yes.
Yeah, that Christopher, that's part of who he is, that he allows for that in his world. I don't see it happening. There's no reason for it to happen because their egos are, the fabrication they've created of their egos is so delusional, I believe, that to let it go is to die. Because I don't know if they know anything other than that false self. So it would be annihilation, and there's no reason they would want annihilation. That's just my theory.
Yeah.
I think so too, in the case of those two. But I was thinking, wasn't there a guy, Rick, you probably know about him, was it Andrew Cohen?
Yes. I interviewed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had some wrongdoings and people came out against him, but I think he apologized.
He did a pretty darn good job. He really humbled himself, got into therapy, did an ayahuasca journey, was driving an Uber for a while. He was just sort of did what he had to do to kind of take himself down quite a few notches and, make amends. I don't know if everyone has forgiven him, but I think some people have. He's probably one of the best examples of somebody doing an about face.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't think that's possible for Raniere,
Yeah.
but that's
No.
great. Yeah.
No, I think that's because it sounds like I'm not sure who the Andrew is you're talking about, but like I think there's a lot of people that do bad things and then they experience true remorse, and I think there's a pathway back when you experience true remorse. But I don't see Raniere doesn't have remorse about anything because he did nothing wrong.
Right.
Right.
It's us. We're the ones that can't see his genius, and the FBI, and the IRS.
And the judge and the jury.
And the judge and the DA. And like none of us could see because we just don't have the capacity to see his brilliance. So
Your IQs are probably less than
way too
200.
low.
I mean, what are you
Way
going to
too
do?
low.
Right. We're so unenlightened.
Andrew Cohen made a documentary actually called How I Started a Cult. You might find it interesting.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah. And all this.
Rick, we discussed Vikram, right? The Vikram movie, documentary?
Yeah, Vikram Yoga, the hot yoga guy. Are you talking about?
No.
Oh, Kumare.
Kumare, sorry, Kumare.
Oh,
Yeah.
that movie. Yeah, Kumare. Right.
Yeah. That's so worth watching. If anybody hasn't seen it, Vikram Gandhi, who directed Kumare, just co-directed with a friend of ours the Burning Man HBO series. Mm-hmm. But it's a fascinating film to watch. Kumare.
Yeah, Kumare is great.
Yeah, it's about this. Well, you explain what it is. So you do more talking than I do.
Do you want to explain it, Bear?
No, you go. Yeah.
So Vikram Gandhi, who looks very Indian, he grows his hair very long, and he decides he's going to try as an experiment just to see if he can convince everybody he's some kind of like Indian guru. So he starts a cult, and he documents the whole process. And towards the end, he begins to realize like he's going to have to disband this thing, but he starts to feel so attached to the power, and he's struggling with should he disband the thing or not. And it's a fascinating look behind the scenes, and so he has all these followers. And so towards the very end of the film, he goes and tells them like it's all just a ruse. None of this is real. And some people are very, very angry at him, and some people just think it's a test, that it is real.
They've had awakenings. They're like unraveling things and touching God.
Yeah. You've probably all read Lord of the Rings, right, or seen the movies?
Yeah.
I'm often reminded of what Frodo had to do. He had to throw the ring into the fire, but the closer he got to the fire, the harder it was to do that, because its power got magnified the closer he got to the fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
I keep wondering if that could ever become the Bible. Like if we get wiped out and all that's left is like a few copies of Lord of the Rings, and the new civilization thinks that all of that is like the new Bible.
I'll join that religion. Okay.
It's kind of a cool religion.
All this talk of narcissism, I was reminded of the concept of the hungry ghost in Buddhism. And so I looked it up. And here's a little bit about the hungry ghost. The hungry ghost, or preta, is one of the 6 realms of existence. The image is striking. A being with an enormous swollen belly and a mouth or throat so tiny, sometimes described as the eye of a needle, that it can never take in enough to satisfy itself. It's perpetually starving, perpetually thirsting, and nothing it finds can nourish it. The insatiable need for attention, the hunger that can never quite be filled no matter how much comes in. One teacher described it in this way: the hungry ghost's small mouth means that whatever favorable attention arrives is never enough. The hunger is structural, not situational. You could pour love into it all day and it wouldn't satisfy, because the capacity to receive is constricted somewhere deeper. With narcissism, something similar seems to be happening. There's often a wound underneath, a deprivation of some basic sense of worth or safety early on, and the constant seeking of admiration or validation is an attempt to fill that, but it doesn't fill it, not lastingly, so the hunger returns.
Wow.
Spot on. That is
That's
spot
good.
on.
That's from the Batgap bot, by the way.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a chat bot that
You have a chatbot? That's great.
yeah. It has
I
like
love it.
nearly 500,000 documents uploaded to it, including 1,700 of the world's traditional spiritual texts.
I
Wow.
love that.
It's really great for checking out spiritual questions.
I
gotta
love
get
that. But that was very accurate. There is that insatiable hunger. It's so funny. They've a part of them. For some, I think they've killed a part of themselves, and now they can't feel that, and so they're constantly hungry.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with somebody who's in Narcissist Playbook, a neuroscientist and clinical psychologist, Heather Berlin, which I'm posting on Sunday, and we had this conversation about the dissociation. Like, and are they born that way? Do they make a decision? Like, what goes on? It's a fascinating conversation as well.
Yeah.
I spoke to a couple of people that I think are narcissists. I won't name any names, but they both talked about how if they don't get attention, they won't exist. Like, that's the belief underneath. Yeah.
You know, one thing that comes to mind as we discuss this point is that the old saying in every tradition that the kingdom of heaven is within. You know, and the Hindu tradition has similar statements, and they all say that, well, that's where the real fulfillment is. But if you don't have access to it, then you naturally seek fulfillment from without, but it's never fulfilling. It's just kind of a faint reflection of the inner fulfillment, but it can never satiate you. And so it would seem to me that a narcissist is somebody who somehow has not learned to access the reservoir of inner fulfillment, and
Right.
therefore they're kind of like they're perpetually addicted to getting little scraps of fulfillment from outer attention and
Totally.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone, I mean, we all have that. We're all, externally focused. That's normal. But yeah, that's a good way of putting it, that with narcissists on that scale, there's no access.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think spirituality is a matter of developing the balance between inner and outer focus, so that you're simultaneously both inwardly and outwardly focused. And
Yeah.
you have the foundation of fulfillment, and on that platform you engage in your outer life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts before I ask my next question?
Mark looks like he has a thought.
I was having one thought about what you're saying, because I was thinking about cheap thrills, Like,
You mean the album by Janis Joplin and
No,
Big Brother
not
and the
that-
Holding
not that,
Company?
that did cross my mind. That when we don't have a deep connection, we go for the cheap thrills. It's
Yeah.
food, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever, right? And so I wonder sometimes if part of what goes on for some of these people that have these pathologies is that they only have cheap thrills.
Yeah.
So they don't have the ability to actually connect in a very deep way, which is what's so interesting about
Yeah.
people with these pathologies that have had spiritual breakthroughs, where they feel this bliss or this elation. I don't know if they feel connection necessarily. They may not. I don't know that we've dug into it deeply enough, but I'm so interested in, well, what are they feeling? Are they just feeling the thrill of charisma and of power, like this electricity in their body? Are they feeling the cheap thrill version of what is available? These are questions we ask ourselves a lot.
Yeah, good.
I realize my computer's going to die. I thought it was plugged in. I'm going to have to.
Oh, go ahead and
remedy
plug
that.
it in. I'll say something while you're doing that, or we can just take a pause and.
It's
I think
actually.
it
I'm going to
is
need
plugged
Mark's
in.
help. It's plugged in, but it's not working. So
Oh,
it's down to
stand
10%.
Stand by.
Yes.
You mean your battery? So let's take a quick break while you fix
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's plugged in, but see how it says 10%.
It shouldn't be draining its battery if it's plugged in.
Oh, he's talking. 1 sec. What were you?
Oh, I was just saying that if it's really plugged in, then the battery shouldn't be draining.
Yeah, now it's plugged in, so something was wrong.
Okay, good.
Yep, it's back.
Okie dokie.
Yep. We'll
So it
both
won't
be-
die now.
You want to check it? No, it won't die now.
Let me just
I-
double check quickly.
So it just wasn't like plugged in properly.
Oh, I can't see the camera now.
I'm getting a message here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm getting a
You can
message
see-
that
oh, you
says
can't see
Bonnie's recording will continue on a new track. Started a new recording for Bonnie
What were you-
Peace due to a change in their devices. So I think you switched cameras somehow.
I think what happened is, just thinking 1 second.
In fact, the coloration kind of changed, so you might want to.
Yeah, I switched cameras. I'm trying to figure out how to solve this.
Oh, it's switched to the computer one.
I
Yeah,
switched the computer one.
in Riverside itself, you can choose which camera it's using.
Yeah, it won't select the external camera now, because it's this kind of laptop that only has 2 inputs.
What if we unplug everything and then put it back in?
Well, the issue is,
Sorry, Nick.
That's okay.
I thought it was charging. Is
Could
the
put it
show
over here.
mic working?
It says it's charging now.
I know, but now we can't get your camera.
Epa.
And I
You-
can't
Well,
get your...
why don't we just do it on the computer camera then? For the rest, it's okay.
We may have to,
Yeah.
We could.
because, yeah, let's do that.
No worries. Yeah, I just have the computer camera.
Yeah, it looks okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll fix it up.
Let me just warm this.
Are people still live?
Oh yeah, there's 65 people on.
Hi. Sorry.
Not too bad.
Well. Okay, Mark's going back.
I need 1
Okay.
minute for the potty break.
He's having a potty break.
That's okay. We won't film that.
This is great. This is
Yeah,
fun,
I'm
Rick.
enjoying this. I'm glad that you joined us.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Is it really hot down in Austin?
Yes.
Mm.
Unbearably.
Yeah,
Texas is no joke.
I know.
Mhm.
We've had a pretty hot summer up here too. A lot of days when I
Have
didn't
you?
want to go out or do anything, because it's just over
Yeah.
100 with the heat index.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
So you go for your super early morning walks?
Not super early. I usually, because I have this whole meditation routine I like to do in the morning, so I don't usually go out until around 10 or 10:30. And by that time, it's starting to get hot. But anyway,
Yeah, it's hot here by about 8 a.m.
yeah.
If we want to walk, it has to be before 7. Yeah.
You're using the wrong mic right now.
Oh, now I'm using the wrong mic.
Yeah, I just heard you. It's the computer mic you're using.
Yeah, it sounds a little echoey.
So everything kind of disconnected. Mm-mm.
Now what are you using?
It's the
Still
same.
the computer. Yeah, we're going to unplug.
Would it be useful to completely disconnect and
Restart,
reconnect?
right? Yeah, do you want to just disconnect everything and restart?
I can't get the Shure reconnected.
Mm-hmm. I
Can you guys
restart.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Mark can't.
What if you like totally logged out and then use the
Yeah.
link that I gave you
Totally
to
log
log
out.
in again?
Use the same link again.
Yeah.
Yep, we'll do that.
Do you want to just
Yeah.
Okay, see you soon.
Okay. So for those listening to the live stream during this break, let me just say, if you hadn't heard me say this, that if you have a question you'd like to ask, look in the description field underneath the video. Yeah, that's better, Bonnie. I'm just saying to the people, look in the description field underneath the video and you'll see a link to a page on Batgap through which you can submit your question. Okay, so Bonnie's back, and I think that helped it to log out and come back.
Yeah.
Great. Now I only see myself, but oh well.
Yeah, and you were only in 720p for some reason.
It's the Mac Air.
I don't know what
Okay.
that's about.
But the microphone sounds okay.
Yeah, microphone sounds good.
Okay.
All right, somehow this will all work out. Okay, a nice little comment came in from a fellow named Craig Smart in the UK. He said, it's not really a question, but more of a want to express gratitude. Thank you for having the courage to come forward and share your experiences and for bringing the darkness into the light. I think he means bringing the light into the darkness. It makes it easier for others to follow the path that you've created for us to walk behind you. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Maybe it is bringing the darkness into the light. You know, it's funny because, Rick, I mentioned to you that Bonnie and I want to make a film about some of the experiences we've been through, especially the spiritual experiences. And we both feel that the spiritual journey for us is maybe not complete without also acknowledging the darkness. So not just being like, la, 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 everything's wonderful, how beautiful, et cetera, but like, you have to also look at like the coercion, the control, the cruelty that exists not only in the world, but in the spiritual realms as well. I think in order to fully come back home, so to speak. So I do think it's important to look at those things as well.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard the term spiritual bypassing, where people try to just sweep it all under the rug and keep your eyes on the light, but then you kind of neglect all kinds of stuff that actually needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and predators love spiritual bypassing. You know, predators think it's great. Yeah, bypass all you want. We get to do what we want, and you can't see.
So you're giving me easy segues because you just mentioned predators, and my next question was that in the film, the Narcissist Playbook, it suggested that narcissists are often skilled at mirroring and reading vulnerability. Explain what those are and how they might play out in, let's say, a retreat center or a sangha or a church or a meditation community. Some of the interviewees in the film describe narcissists as predators who scan for vulnerability. What makes spiritual seekers especially vulnerable targets?
That's interesting. I'll just jump in first. I mean, I think one of the things that people like that are very good at doing is they are very good at mirroring. You know,
What is that? What's mirroring?
Let's take an extreme example. Well, let's say if you and I can't see you right this second, but if you and I are together, it's funny, we were taught this in the call too. Whatever you do, I do physically as well. Like if you lean this way, I lean that way. You know, if you do this, I do that. The person starts to feel on an unconscious level that you get them. You know, when they're excited about something, you show excitement about the same thing, and they feel like, oh, we're simpatico. Like he gets me. That's a technique that somebody can use, and psychopaths have talked about this, that they're very good at this. They're not feeling any of the things you're feeling, but they're mirroring you, and they're matching your tone. They're matching what you're doing so that you feel, oh, he really understands me. That's really problematic because they may not understand you at all, you know, but they understand that on a very, maybe it's almost a limbic level. If you're mirroring the thing that they're doing, then the target feels like they're understood. Everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to feel like that they're being seen. And so that's very dangerous because now you think, oh, I'm finally seen, you know, and some of these people are very, very skilled at that, and also they may love bomb you to where, you know, you feel like, oh my God, I'm finally understood. Like I'm finally loved in the way I always wanted to be loved. And if you're looking at some teacher on stage who's like, just feels like they're just beaming love at you, it feels intoxicating. It could just be a game. It just could be a ruse.
Yeah. Another thing I felt with a couple of spiritual teachers, and to a certain extent I think it might have been true, was that they know me better than I know myself. It's like they can really see into me and pick up on things that I'm unaware of.
I remember feeling that, yeah, especially in the beginning of ESP. We still call it ESP, but yeah, NXIVM. Because they did have such a way of pinpointing like everything that you're experiencing, and it did feel like deep understanding. Yeah, which then caused you to doubt yourself as well. Like, yeah, maybe I don't know myself. Maybe I am whatever they're saying I am.
Yeah. Okay. Mark, any comments before I go on?
No. That's 100% true. 100% true.
Do you think that some spiritual traditions or organizational structures unintentionally reward narcissistic traits?
I haven't thought. What do you think? Yeah. You know, I'm just thinking about this feeling of like wanting to touch heaven. And, you know, the idea that there's something other than who we are and something better than who we are. And I think especially organizations that somehow demean just being human, that everybody starts to feel like they should be reaching for something greater than who they are. I've been in organizations where they sort of trash humanity, trash being human. Now, that may not come from a malignant place. That may come from somebody who's, the leader may be spiritually bypassing, you know, and they say, you need to be more than human, you know, you need to be the lion, not the lamb, or whatever bullshit comes out of their mouth. And that could intentionally become very, very narcissistic, because now you have to build a false self. You have to pretend you're this great, noble something that you are, maybe as well as just being a human being with certain foibles. But I think the rejection of human foibles can build a very narcissistic structure in an organization.
Yeah, I think also just society, and maybe this is natural, but society rewards narcissism. I'm even just thinking in terms of a tribe. Like, you want the strong leader. You want the leader who doesn't have any uncertainty, who's fully confident and certain. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean narcissism, but I feel like there's a link. And if there's a really charismatic narcissist that feels like super certain and strong, then for the tribe members, that feels like a strong leader.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of a societal leader who never admits that he's made a mistake, even though it's blatantly obvious that he did make a mistake or was wrong about something, but won't admit it. I mean, at least half the population buys that line of BS, and the other half says, sees it as for what it is, but that the percentage that buys it can be sufficient to get the person elected.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is why I think individuation is important. You know, if we're looking for a big mommy or a big daddy, I know that's not a grown up. You know, so I think that a lot of that could be solved perhaps by people taking just personal responsibility. This, I think, to me is one of the dangers of some organized religions, is the idea that there's something divine outside of you that you need to supplicate yourself for. A sky wizard. I really have problems with the different sky wizards, you know.
A sky wizard with a rule book.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. On the other hand, there obviously, 2 points. You made it a couple of minutes ago. You were saying that the hope that there's, or the belief that, there's something much more glorious than this sordid, tawdry place in which we live, and In a way, there is.
There is.
I mean, there could be such a more ideal society, or your own inner experience could be so much more profound than it is. So some teachers say to people, well, this is it. You know, just accept reality as it is. Don't be aspiring to anything other than this. And, you know, what if a person is deeply depressed or psychotic or something? It's almost cruel to say that to them, because there could be something so much better for them. That's
Yeah.
one thing.
Yeah, I'm all for aspiring to things being amazing, which I absolutely believe they can be. And
Yeah.
I do think we live in a world that has its problems and has its trappings, and, you know, all the boxes we think we need to fit into, and the programming and the conditioning and everything, that I think it's a natural thing to want to break out of that and come back to source, like find yourself, come back home to yourself.
And to Mark's Sky Wizard point, I mean, there are people who, in any field, know more than you do. You know, you go to college to get a PhD in quantum physics. Presumably, the professor knows more about it than you do. And that could be true in spiritual realms as well. So it's one of these sort of nuanced points that you have to approach thoughtfully.
Discernment.
I agree. At the same time, you know, I'm somebody that was very, very susceptible to people that were very smart. You know, I love smart people. There's something about just the basic human being, just being, I'm going to say this very badly. Everybody has intrinsic potential dignity. And I think that just because somebody has a skill in a certain area doesn't mean that we are lesser than them. I think about, you know, people on their deathbed when they're about to pass, like, you know, they're stripped of everything, you know, so who's better? You know, is there a better person or a worse person? So I worry sometimes about the perhaps unearned respect we give certain people. I'm all for respecting a particular skill that somebody has. And so, if, you know, I come from, you know, I was in the Boy Scouts as a kid, and, you know, I grew up in sort of a very sort of Calvinistic religion, and the film crews are like that as well. Like, you have respect for somebody that knows more than you in terms of that job.
Yeah.
But when that job is over, you're just a human being, you know?
Sure.
I think sometimes we forget, like, we're just human beings as well. And sometimes we look at the people on stages that wear the robes and think that they're somehow afloat on water, and they don't. And to me, the best teachers are the ones that are just very, very human.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, that can talk about the human vulnerabilities and the struggles that they're having, because then it makes you like, holy shit, even you? Wow, this is different than I thought, you know. I think that's very freeing.
Jeff Foster talks a lot that way, if you know who Jeff is.
Yes, he's great.
Love Jeff. Jeff's amazing. He's amazing. Yeah.
And there's something to be said for always checking things, like even if there's an expert, just always checking things with yourself. So not outsourcing, like, yes, trusting someone who knows their stuff and taking that in. But also, like, I always like remind people to put your hand on your heart and just take a moment to like drop in and connect and ask yourself what's right for you. And that's going to come from you, not from someone saying you need to do this. Like, that's the way. And,
you know, I mean, the three of us are all lesser basketball players than LeBron James, but
Way
it doesn't mean we're lesser in every respect. Einstein was asked to be the first president of Israel, and he says, "I'm a physicist. What do I know about politics?" You know, find somebody who understands that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be terrible at politics because I would just speak my mind.
Yeah.
And then I would probably be dead.
I'd just walk away.
Another big theme in many cults is secrecy. You know, things, again, it has to do with the concentric circles, but often it's a very tightly controlled need-to-know basis. And, you know, I mean, I'm in the TM movement, there was always like a lot of paranoia, like, oh, the CIA is looking at us, and you know, we can't let this be known publicly or whatever. And there might have been some legitimacy of that. I think they might have. I was teaching in the DC TM Center shortly after Jonestown, and I can swear the phones were tapped. I'd pick up the phone, and all of a sudden click, and it'd be a hollow tone. I'd say hi to the person that was, but but secrecy actually plays an insidious role in many of these organizations, and Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, it's so funny. Secrecy was sold to us in a different way. Like, it was interesting. I remember them saying, "Well, we shouldn't share it because it's patented or whatever, and that you're breaking the contract." Or sometimes it's like, "I wouldn't share these things; they wouldn't understand." And so that was the kind of secrecy that was that was going on. But then also, I remember, this is really interesting. There was this belief that people had, and Raniere told me about, certainly, that he was being watched very carefully by intelligence agencies. So we had to be very careful about never letting anybody know where his whereabouts were, which I bought. And later I realized it's just so he could avoid accountability. He just wanted everyone to protect him. But like, there was this big thing about being secretive about where he was, who he was with, where he was going, what time he was going there. Sort of like, a president where the Secret Services don't publish any details,
Also, it was so he could just like do his own schedule and not commit to anything, and just when he felt like it, show up.
Yeah. His famous thing was that he had a 23-hour clock.
What does that
do you mean?
mean?
He says, I don't have a 24 hour, it's 23 hours, or maybe it was 25, I can't remember. There was so much drivel, my brain
But
can't
it's
retain
not
it
true.
anymore.
He was napping all the time.
He was napping all the time. He was like screwing in the day and screwing at night and napping in the day.
And claiming to be a celibate.
Indeed he was. He was a renunciate. They said he was a renunciate.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never seen a renunciate need so much sex and attention.
Oh, yeah.
You're always right.
But the secrecy thing, I mean, in your Bentino series, there's all these NDEs that everybody has to sign.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And part of the reason that people have been scared to speak is because they signed NDAs, like some of them for $300,000, which, by the way, if anybody's listening, that shit is not enforceable. That's not enforceable. We've spoken to lawyers. That shit's not enforceable.
Not when there's crimes.
No,
Yeah.
not when there's things going on like that. So, but a lot of people are quiet because of that. And there's also the thing, so Bonnie woke up first out of the cult, and then she helped me wake up. And one of my first conversations was with a culty programmer called Rick Ross, not the rapper, the
Well, I know
culty
him.
programmer.
Not
Rick,
personally,
yeah.
but I know of him. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rick was very interesting. So I called Rick, and I said, "Hey, Rick, my name is Mark Vicente. Do you know who I am?" He says, "I know exactly who you are," because he was the devil to me, and I was probably the devil to him. And I said, "Listen, this is what's going on, and like, I'm out, and like, I need to talk." And he was great. He was wonderful. And one of the things he said is, you have to get rid of the unreasonable fears you have. You have to get rid of the idea that he can see what you're doing and knows your thoughts. I thought that was interesting, because that is one of the things that happens when people leave cults, because they've been led to believe that the leader is all-seeing and all-knowing and knows your secrets. Because what's also happened as well, and this is not the same thing, but what's also happened is there's a culture of confession that goes on in cults. So there's secrecy, but also confession. So you're confessing all the time. And some organizations take copious notes about all your confessions. So you feel like they know your secrets, but you don't know their secrets.
That's so true. You have to be an open book.
Yeah.
But they're not.
They're not an open book, yeah. And so people leave, and they're afraid, for instance, at first to say anything negative about the leader, because what if the leader feels them saying it? And so when you're in that mindset, you need to talk to somebody that's going to say to you, that's bullshit, right? Like, it's just bullshit. The leader doesn't know what the hell you're doing. The leader's self-involved in their own thing and their own paranoia. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know that you just met with the FBI. They don't know that.
They're not omniscient.
No, they're not omniscient. But there is this feeling, and as Bonnie said, because you're an open book to them, but they're a closed book to you, and they use that. So there's a lot of mystery around the leaders, because there's stuff you don't know. And also, Bonnie and I laughed about this. There was all this whispering going on all the time.
Oh, the
my God,
whispering.
right?
I wish I could see your face, Rick, because I can't see how the whispering.
But there was all this whispering, and I would sometimes say it. I would sometimes say in executive board meetings with the company, like, what's all the whispering? And it was all the women that were whispering. Now, I realized later they were all sleeping with him, and there was all this weird stuff going on. And so we didn't understand what the whispering was. And the whispering was all their little secrets, you know, about Keith said this and Keith said that. It was infuriating. And then later we realized, because they're all in this damn blackmail multi-level sex ring thing that's going on.
But even before we
didn't know.
woke up and knew that was happening, we were making fun of that, just Mark and I, like between ourselves, because there'd be like this huddle of them just be like, psh, 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 and they'd look at you like, psh, psh, psh. I mean, it was so bitchy.
It's so true. It's very bitchy. It's very weird.
That's funny.
But then, like, once when you read the court documents, you realize what was actually going on.
Yeah.
That's where all the secrets that were going on, you know. It was like Raniere was, you know, wanting to have a recommitment ceremony with a group blowjob with 6 women. There's all this weird stuff going on, you know, and like paddling and sex toys and dungeons and just like oddness, you know.
Or Claire was trying to sue someone into oblivion.
Yes. And like you said, Rick, there's these circles, you know, like so clearly we weren't in deep enough to know what was going on, because when we found out the true nature of it, I mean, I remember the FBI told Bonnie and I, like, said to us, like, there's stuff you still don't know about, you're going to find out about, like, in the next week.
Tons
And
of
then
stuff.
the indictment documents would come out, and we were like, oh shit, we didn't know about that, you know.
Wow.
A lot was
And
kept from
meanwhile,
us.
the public might have been signing up for $2,000 courses, you know,
Yeah.
for this exciting self-improvement thing, with
Yeah.
no idea whatsoever that there's this weirdly weird inner core behind this thing they're signing up for.
100%.
Absolutely. Aren't they still doing stuff, Mo?
They're still
In
doing
Mexico.
stuff.
They're
In
still
Mexico, yeah.
running courses or something.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still going.
Interesting.
You know, Rick, I don't know if you saw the discussion I had with Dr. Ramani on my podcast. That's the one you saw? We were chatting?
I think I did, yes. It was just one of
Yeah.
your recent WTF episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to that.
I had to cut a piece out of it, but the piece that was cut out of it is we were talking about, you know, when people leave abusive relationships, there's a lot of good stuff they remember, and the same with cults.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's the issue of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So, like, when we talk about those $2,000 courses, the thing that's complex is there were good things in there.
Yeah.
There were some profound things in there. And, you know, I threw everything away. Bonnie didn't. And I'm starting to retrieve the stuff that Bonnie just went deeper. I just was like, screw everything.
Well, I threw
But-
that stuff away, just not the spirituality.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. But there was some good stuff. And Bonnie and I talk sometimes about the way we think about things now, Bonnie is an excellent, pattern recognition is Bonnie's thing in life. She is really good at it. And some of the tech actually helped her get good at it as well, you know? So there are good things. It just takes time to separate out, well, what was the good thing and what was the not good thing? I think that takes time.
Yeah, like tools
Yeah.
that can have good effect, but they're used by someone with a bad intention. It's kind of, you have to separate it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I practice basically TM meditation to this day since 1968. And my predominant sentiment towards Maharishi is gratitude, because it saved my life and continues to enrich my life. But on the other hand, there was some weird stuff in that organization, which, you know, the general public still doesn't know about.
Right.
But I still encourage people to learn the technique. Just maybe just don't get too heavily involved.
Right.
Yeah, because there was good stuff, you know. It was really good stuff, and people get confused as well because they say, "But there was good stuff," and in some ways, therefore, they can't be any evil.
Yeah, that's where you have to be nuanced. You know, it's
Right. And some people really
Don't,
held on
don't
to
throw
that.
the baby out with the bathwater, but don't drink the bathwater.
Right. Don't justify the bathwater. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think
here's
at first some people, like in my case, I had to throw everything out. That was just my
Yeah.
way, because you need distance from stuff that is so tainted.
Yeah. I didn't
and
do
then
any
maybe start
coaching.
picking through it afterwards, and you know.
Yeah.
There's a song by the band in which there was a line that you take what you need and you leave the rest.
Yeah. And in terms
question
of
came-
coaching,
Yeah.
just in terms of coaching and mentoring, Mark and I threw that away very much. Like, I think it took me 7 years to start mentoring again. Yeah.
A question came in from Yvette Amour in Ontario. Mark, What the Bleep was heavily funded by the Ramtha organization. Comment on that cult and how it evolved to today, or how you left it, or whatever you want to say about that.
I think it's an important point. It wasn't funded by the Ramtha organization.
Okay,
at all.
good to get that straight.
That came about because Jay-Z Knight was aware of what I wanted in my dreams, and one day I got a call from one of the guards to say, "Hey, could you go up to the house?" I'm like, "All right, it's fine." I went up to the house.
She had guards.
Oh yes. Oh yes. And so sitting there was Salma Hayek, who was like kind of a friend of mine, and they were having tea with some other person. And Jay-Z said, "This is this guy's will, you know, and tell him your dreams." And I go, "All right, fine. Tell him my dreams. You know, I want to make a movie, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, quantum mechanics, and yada yada yada." And basically, Will said, "Yeah, okay, great, I'm in." And I was like, "That's weird," 'cause I thought he was joking. And he basically said, "Well, I'm very rich, so yeah, I'll fund it."
Huh.
That's how that started.
Okay.
Now, it was, you know, at that point, Joe Dispenza was a teacher there. Micheal Ledwith was a teacher there. So
Interesting. So Dispenza was into Ramtha?
Oh, yeah, we were in the inner circle for
And Salma Hayek?
for years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
Wow.
years.
Didn't know that.
Oh, there's so much in this brain of mine.
Careful,
But,
this is going to get excerpt
I know
into
I
the
know
press.
this is going to get out there, and like someone's going to be, "You shouldn't say these." Anyway, but that's how it started, and many of the teachers that were teachers at the school were in the film, and basically, a lot of the philosophical ideas that we had been exploring there, you know, ended up in the film, and of course, you know, Jay-Z Knight, aka Ramtha, was in the film as well. Mm-hmm. As far as how I feel about it, you know, I have some reservations. I think I threw too much of it away, because in the end, we started something. You know, we created a film that became, I guess, the beginning of many films like that. You know, that then came The Secret, and then there's many films. And also, honestly, to be frank, it's miraculous getting anything made. So I look back with extreme pride at having created something that I think was a cultural conversation starter. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like some kind of you know, funded by this nefarious organization to, like, you know, conquer the world kind of thing. Yeah. It wasn't that. It was a few people that really felt impassioned about these ideas. And my whole thing was, I want to get these ideas out of the weird bookstores onto screens into the world. That was my passion at that point.
Well, you did it. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
It made a splash. So we've gone about as far as you wanted to go time-wise, but we did have a break in the middle. Do you want to wrap it up, or do you want to go another 10 minutes, or what do you want to do?
Your call,
dude.
Oh,
Your call.
I'll go another 10 minutes if
Sure,
it's okay with you.
Sure.
I don't want to overstay my welcome. Okay, so...
Actually, I do want to say one thing since we're going a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so Bonnie and I mentioned this to you, Rick, Bonnie and I have been wanting to make this film for a long time, about some of her experiences waking up, and also how that affected the, you know, NXIVM kind of, you know, coming to pieces, and also looking at this very issue. Well, can psychopaths, you know, experience enlightenment as well? But mostly the focus of the film is about how this is available to everybody, you know. And Bonnie came up with something wonderful the other day that I love, that I've been talking about. You know, she said to me, you know, we get stuck at the doorway towards divinity. Like we think the doorway is it, and we get stuck at the door. And maybe the door is a person, or it's a church, or it's a leader, or whatever. It's a proxy for the real thing, but we get stuck there. And so we want people to really understand that this is available to everybody at any time, at any moment, in any walk of life. You know, it's not like the sea of consciousness is, the spigot is closed, you know, for certain people and open for other people. So that's an important thing we want to share.
Yeah. I think that's what might be meant by that phrase, if you see the Buddha on the road, kill him.
Kill him.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
'cause
also
it's dangerous.
part of the reason I called this Buddha at the gas pump. I want to convey the idea that this is for ordinary people. You don't have to float on a cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Bonnie said, this has been your podcast was a big part of our awakening from the cult.
Nice. Well, I'm
Yeah,
honored.
huge. I binged like every episode back in 2016, and it just ripped open my programming, and then I was off. Thanks, Rick.
Cool. I'm really pleased that I mean, you know, you send, I mean, I'm sure this is true of you guys too. You do something, it sends out ripples of influence, and you have no idea how it might be affecting people. But occasionally you hear some little feedback that is just so gratifying.
Yeah.
You did good, Rick. You did good.
Well, I'm going to keep on trucking as long as I can.
And you're a podcast pioneer too. Wow, you've been doing it for so many years.
Yeah, started podcasting it in 2010. Yeah.
Wow, awesome.
So, okay, I have a few related questions that'll be good to wrap up with. So, firstly, what responsibility do senior students, board members, or institutions have when they see red flags? And what comes to mind here is the Kripalu thing with Yogi Amrit Desai, who turned out was having sexual affairs and so on. And so they kicked him out, basically, but then they kept the organization going, and they did all kinds of therapy and self-assessment and this and that. And to this day, Kripalu is a healthy organization that's doing good stuff. So, very often the opposite happens, where all these senior people and board members or so on are part of the cult, and they can't be objective or honest or, question the leader. But perhaps in a healthier society or a healthier organization, they'd be able to. And so how would you advise them to step up and take that responsibility?
Yeah, it is a responsibility. And I would say come back to your why. Like, what's your mission with this whole thing? If you're trying to free humanity and create great things in the world, then what does that mean if you stick around and support something terrible? Like, how does that go against your own life's mission? And I do think some people get really hung up on but it's my job. I can't lose my paycheck or something. And not that we were making very much money, but we, were entangled. But it's when you realize the darkness, how can you stay? I don't know. I guess it depends on how much of a conscience you have, or how much you're listening to it.
Kind of reminds me of the Nuremberg trials, where all of Hitler's underlings kept saying, "Well, we were only following orders."
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said. I think that a person has to decide what's important to them. Are their values important, or is the brick and mortar of the organization important? What's important?
Yeah. Why'd you get into it in the first place?
Yeah, because your values you take to the grave. You got to sleep with yourself. The other stuff is whatever. So I think people just have to decide what's really important. Like Bonnie said, what's the reason you got into this? Because if the reason you got into this is to free people, then basically suppressing your values to protect something that goes against your values is that's just damages your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So any feedback on that, Bonnie, before I go on?
I do have one more thought. In terms of responsibility, for me especially, because I had promoted NXIVM publicly, even if it was just a couple of Facebook posts, or I'd mentioned it publicly because I thought it was so great. I was people need to come and do it. So I felt a very strong responsibility to speak publicly about it and say, look, I talked about this, I was wrong, this is going on. And it was interesting for me to watch people who were also very public, top salespeople who were out and about, really promoting it publicly, who then didn't do anything to try to stop it or say that it was bad. Because I think there is a responsibility there.
Well, Sarah Edmondson's example is admirable. I mean, she was running the Vancouver Center, and she had gotten all these people into it. She gave them all their money back.
Yeah.
And she, had these meetings with them explaining what was actually going on and so on. So that was cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the Vancouver police came after her. So she was the
because Renee kind of sicked them on her.
Because Claire Bronfman got a meeting with the high up police in Vancouver, They gave her a 2-hour meeting, perhaps money speaks, and listened to her. And I called the police and I called the investigator relentlessly to tell him what was really going on.
Yeah,
Even
and
got
Claire Bronfman was an heiress of the Seagram's fortune, right? And she ended up going to prison for a while.
Yep.
She did, but she's out now.
She's
So,
out, and she's still loyal.
Is
Yeah.
she? Wow.
Yeah.
She's still loyal, yeah. Yeah.
As far as I understand. Yeah.
Okay, so here's a good closing question, I think. If a spiritual community truly understood narcissism, let's say they had narcissism courses in a spiritual community to make sure everybody really understood what it was, what would they do differently to ensure that it didn't infect or infect their community or its leader, or if its leader were already infected, to disinfect him or get rid of him or whatever? What advice would you give to any spiritual organization, which could be more broadly any organization, to set up a force field against narcissism? To use a
I'm
Star
going to jump
Trek
in
term.
quickly with a pitch. Please see
Okay.
my film, Narcissist Playbook.
Alrighty, which
You can
I'll
go see
provide
it
a
at-
link to on your Batgat page.
narcissistplaybook.uscreen.io. Go see it, because the entire idea about the film is to show the playbook. You know, sometimes we say hashtag see the pattern, because it's my belief that if you see the pattern, you can see what you're looking at, instead of thinking of like, oh my God, they're so charismatic, and yes, they have off days, and okay, they were a bit hard on that student, but maybe the student needed it, and you can see, no, that was cruelty. You know, or whatever it was, you sort of like you take the blinders off and you can actually see the pattern in front of you. It's well established. What makes cults so similar is the leader has the same pathology. It's always some kind of narcissism, perhaps malignant. That's why they operate in such a similar fashion. Whatever clothes they're wearing, whether it's an MLM or a, you know, orgasm cult or like a whatever, it pretty much operates the same way, because the same pathology is running the organization. So if you can understand the pathology, you can start to see what you're looking at. So that's my pitch for why it's important.
Yeah.
Are you aware, I'm sorry, Bonnie? You were gonna
Go
say?
ahead.
Are you aware of spiritual organizations that aren't run by narcissists, that are really healthy?
They might exist, but maybe I have a bias because I've just been looking at the ones that are run by assholes. So it is entirely possible they exist, but I haven't been looking broadly enough.
Yeah.
I can just think of like some smaller ones. I bet you there's like yoga studios and stuff like that that are run by good, like truly well-meaning people.
As far as I can tell, the Vedanta Society is really good. I've interviewed Swami Sarvapriyananda a couple of times, and also Swami Medananda, who's been the Swami in their Hollywood chapter, but they seem pretty squeaky clean. I don't hear much, you know. And the Yogananda's group has, I think, had a pretty good track record over the years. I think there have been some rogue teachers who've gotten off track,
Right.
but on the whole, I think it's maintained a very healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also like Bonnie and I've always enjoyed like Adyashanti, Jeff
Right.
Foster,
Right.
Eckhart Tolle. I mean, I've always enjoyed this stuff.
Yeah,
that
there's
they've been
great
teaching.
teachers.
I know when Adya first got into teaching, he told his mother and his wife, keep an eye on me. If I start getting off track, let me have it. Sock it to me.
Oh,
That's great.
awesome.
Yeah, that shows the intention, right? He's like checking on himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Which
beautiful.
is another interesting point, actually. I know I've interviewed some spiritual teachers who routinely either go to therapy or go to some retreat or get together with peers. In fact, the ASI, the Association for Spiritual Integrity, has this peer group thing where groups of 4 or something have these conversations with each other once a month or once a week, whatever it is, to kind of get feedback from peers. Because that's one problem, is very often spiritual teachers don't have any friends other than their students. And so they'll have no peers. And that creates a problem, because there's no one who kind of can call them on their shit, who's at the same level of authority.
That's
Totally.
interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was also just thinking on the topic of like educating within organizations on narcissism. It's interesting because just because there may be education about narcissism in a group, don't assume that that's not a destructive group. because Raniere actually did. He
and he had
taught
the
us
critical
about-
thinking education
Yeah.
thing going. Yeah.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah, he taught us about psychopathy and he taught us about narcissism.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, not the full picture. And in some ways, I think he was trying to do was inoculate himself, or inoculate us, so that we would look at him and go like, "There's no way somebody teaching this could be that person at all."
Yeah, that's what came to mind when you said that. It was like a sneaky way of.
I couldn't be.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
If I were that, obviously I wouldn't offer a course on it, so I couldn't be that.
Yeah.
100%.
And it's in
Interesting.
plain sight. There seems to be some enjoyment.
Yes, it's a pretty sophisticated trap, you know. People, and this is one of the issues, you know, when people will look at something like The Vow and they go like, well, clearly he's a monster, but they don't see the beginning. You know, that's why at the last minute we were able to get a new episode 1 for The Vow to show the dream, because we felt like if we couldn't show people the dream, they couldn't understand why the hell would you be involved in something destructive. And I say to people sometimes, it's like, you know, it's like saying, well, the Titanic was going to crash. Yeah, but they didn't know that. They thought it was the greatest ship that would ever sail. There was a lot of excitement. You know the Titanic crashed.
Mm-hmm.
You know it went down. So you think it was doomed and fated from the beginning. That's not what they thought. They were told it was the greatest ship that was ever built to ever sail. So it's the same thing. You see a cult, you go, oh, that terrible cult. Yeah, but you know that now. Like, because they look at these TV shows and they go like, how could you not have seen? I'm seeing it. Yes, because you have all the information now.
Yeah.
You know he went to prison.
And
know?
some media leads with like the most sensational, horrible stuff, like the sex trafficking, everything. And so the audience sees that and they're like, yeah, how could you be so dumb?
Yeah.
It's like, well,
I believe I was called a sex cult official one day.
in the New York Times. Thanks,
Oh,
New
yeah.
York Times.
Geez, you got the label, you didn't even get the sex.
I did that. I keep saying that. There was so much stuff going on we didn't know about.
I got the sex cult label too. I'm like, I wasn't in it.
Which is, again, that concentric circles thing, you know? Here you were, one of the higher ups in the whole thing, and yet you still didn't have the whole picture of what was going on.
I did not. I did not.
Yeah.
I did not. The FBI said there's more coming. You'll see stuff you don't know. And I was like, oh, shit,
Interesting.
there it is.
Yeah, I mean, I know people who were Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's personal secretary who knew that he was having affairs and stuff like that, and others who were his personal secretaries for years and never even got onto it. And
Right.
you know,
They weren't
it's-
trusted with that information.
Yeah, well, no, well, he never divulged it to anybody, I don't think. But some people got wind of it and left, and others just, he managed to conceal it well enough that people who in his tightest inner circle didn't know what was going on.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I say that again, I got to sort of add that I'm very grateful to the man. He had a wonderful influence on my life. He was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I mean, Einstein was a bit of a sexual predator. He was bonking his secretary and cheating on his wives and all that stuff. So, and yet he was Einstein. So,
Yeah. Do you write
Yeah.
everything off?
yeah, you can't. There's a nice quote from the Sargadatta. He said, "The ability to appreciate paradox and ambiguity is a sign of spiritual maturity."
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, this has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed getting to know you a bit more concretely than I have so far.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll meet in person someday. Most of my best friends I've never actually met in person.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
we'll have to come visit.
yeah, keep up the great work.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Thank you. You too. And thanks again for everything you've done, because really, like, I can say that, lightly, how much you've affected my life, but that was such a key moment for me. And that was actually 10 years ago. But if I think about the course of my life and our life, you had a profound effect
Wow.
with
Well,
what you
I'm-
shared.
I'm very flattered and grateful and appreciative and all that stuff, and it makes me feel really good that I'm just doing my thing here, and wanting to,
Hello.
like you, wanting to contribute something uplifting to the world.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for doing your thing.
Sure. All right, we'll be in touch. And thanks to
Sounds
everybody
good.
who has been listening or watching, and we will see you for the next one. Okay, don't hang up.
Not hanging up.
Don't.